Hello and welcome to another CT Tech Gaming video. This is Microsoft Flight Simulator and we're doing another tutorial on how to get the Airbus A320 from cold and dark to takeoff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into the cockpit, and as per the previous video with the 747, we're going to go through the startup procedure, kind of show you how to do it, so that way when you guys jump into this aircraft you don't need necessarily a checklist there. You kind of can practice it and just get used to doing it as per what it should be and as per the Airbus checklist official. Now I'm in the NX fly-by-wire mod, which is basically an updated version of the default aircraft. The main differences on this one, it's got a few more switches that work, and also if you're still running after patch 2, obviously depending on when you watch this video, that patch may have been old now, so this is the September patch. And you're having the issues where engine 1 basically shuts down on takeoff. This mod fixes that, so it's well worth the download. Okay, so let's get straight to it, and you go to the intro and I'll go to the cockpit. Okay, so we're sat in the cockpit now. As you can see, these instruments are all dark, everything's turned off. So the only thing that's shown available is the engine power. So essentially what you need to do is these little switches here, you want to flick those up. This basically puts the first officers and the pilot's displays on. So these two and these two displays. And then down at the bottom here, you've got these ECAM switches here, or knobs. And that will do these displays here. And that means as soon as we put in battery 1 and battery 2 and then external power, you'll now see all these have now come on and they're doing their initial checks. At this stage, what I generally do is the wing light and the nav logo as well, just so people know we've got power to the aircraft. Although we're not under APU or its contained power, so the beacon light will stay off at this stage. You will see these suddenly come to life in a few seconds. But what we're going to do at this stage as well is move this to a line just to preempt and start that procedure going, because it takes about 7 minutes roughly. So you can see these displays are now all one by one slowly come to life. You can see on the center now it's saying IRS align or IRIN align in 7 minutes. So these displays here won't, or these two in particular, won't come in until the GPS is aligned. Okay. Now, as you can see, this one's still relatively dark, so what you can do here, if you flick these controls, it will brighten up this panel here. Now, if it is dark, you do have a floodlight here you can use to light up the actual instruments. You can see it kind of just there, just lighting up. And you also have this one which lights up this panel down here. You have the same up top. This one will light up this text, and then you got your dome light, which are these lights here. Ooh. If you watch this light here as I flick the switch, you can see it gets brighter and turns off. So obviously I don't need them, but it's just so if you do need them, you've now got you now know how to turn the light on, so you can actually see what you're doing. So we've got the batteries on, we've got the external power, we've done the IRS. Now normally you would start working down this panel. It kind of works in a flow in the Airbus. You've got this panel, then that panel, then that panel, and stuff like that. But because obviously it's still a work in progress, not all the switches work yet. If you are running straight default, you'll probably find these don't work yet either, and they'll automatically be set to a line. So if you are running on the default aircraft, some of these steps may automatically get done for you, in which case just skip to the next one or until the next step that it will physically let you do. Okay. So what we're going to do now is the hydro pumps, I believe, are automatically on as standard. Yep, you'd then normally put these on. The rest of this panel, you would click this on normally, but as you see, most of this panel's inop, and this GPWS system is already on as standard. If I flick it, you'll see it says off, so it's already on as standard, and it does say inop next to them. So I'm not sure if they actually, other than the pressing of the button, I don't think they're actually connected to something on the other end yet in the sim. So on this side's pretty much done now. The hydraulic pumps and everything, they are inop at the moment, so you can't do any of those. But we would now start putting on the fuel pumps. And what I'm going to do at this stage is just go to clearance and request IFR clearance. And the reason we do that is because we want to basically let them know we're now ready to start up, do the startup process for the aircraft. It's telling us our squawk, so I'm going to do the squawk code in. And we also know 7,000 is what we're going to. And we know 9 left, so that's useful to remember for later on. Is our takeoff airport. Oh, got planes just flying off there, which is quite a nice little sight to see. Okay. Okay, now just for the sake of realism, what I'm now going to do is get the baggage service, catering service and the jetway connected, so passengers and all of the bags and everything else can get loaded onto the plane.
Heathrow ground CT2020, could you please send the catering truck? CT2020, the catering truck is on the road.
We put the request the jetway connection as well. So if I go outside, you can see now all the stuff is coming in. That's lining up with there. He's going to that door, and you now see the jetway coming up as well. So this basically means we can now get everything loaded onto the aircraft that we would need, and essentially they can get all that done while I finish doing a startup procedure on the actual aircraft. At the moment, I've been having an issue when I put on the liveries where it's making the plane not start up without using a shortcut key. So I'm just running the bog standard Airbus default livery, just because it's then discounting that as a possible issue. Okay, but obviously the liveries do sometimes work, they sometimes don't. They're a little bit hit and miss, but after speaking in the Discord, they seem to be saying that's one of the issues since patch 2, which is having a few problems as well. So it is a bit temperamental, but obviously once it's fixed in the next patch, all this will be relevant and will all work as standard. Okay, so now we've got the fuel pumps on. We want the generation engine, the engine generators are already on a standard, but they do say fault because obviously they're not physically running at the moment, the engine, so they're not generating anything. Now the packs are inop at the moment, and what I do generally do is just flick these on. They don't actually do anything within the sim, I don't believe, but I just like to make them look like I'm actually turning them on for a bit of realism more than anything. Okay, and I believe the engine bleeds are on as standard. They are, so we can leave that as well. Okay, and the hot air is inop, so that's fine. So at this stage, we've got essentially this bit's now all set up as much as we want. You'd have your anti-ice off at this moment in time. What we'll now be doing is putting on the seatbelt lights, the non-smoking and the emergency arm lights, so that they're all up and running. And there we go, that is now all set and ready. And everything now is done on that side. Okay, so we're still showing 3 minutes for IR alignment, so that's why that screen's still on. And you can see now he's finished loading the baggage, and the cargo's now, sorry, they finished loading the catering, the cargo's now just finished, that's closing, so it's just how that's open. I'm just going to turn the brightness up on the MCDU, or MacDo as people call it, just for in a minute. I'm not going to do the main programming of this in this particular video. That will be done in a separate standalone video for anybody that's interested in it. For the time being, I've set the flight plan in the world map, so it does the majority of setup on here as standard. There will be things I do need to still use in this, but this is just a but that's just for the initial takeoff procedures and stuff like that for the performance pages. But it's just essentially just give if you're doing things in the world map and say low altitude or high altitude IFR, it'll automatically program all these anyway for you. Okay. So we've got that. The parking brake's obviously on. At this stage, I'd be putting the locking the door because we don't want people coming in. Okay. So that's that done. The flaps should be at 0 at this stage. They should be down, and that should be at normal. And the thrust levels levers should be at idle. Okay, we've now also got that at standby at the moment, which is fine. Transponder's been put in the code as per ATC, and all the panels are on. Okay, and everything else is done at that stage for the time being. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to go into the flight plan. Here you can see it's got EGLL. I'm going to click on this at this stage because we've been told what runway we're departing on. So 09 left is there. I'm going to click on that and click insert, and you'll now see it says EGLL 09 left, and that's basically just means now the computer system knows what we are using in regards to runway takeoff, and it just means it's running a bit smoother. We've had our clearance, we've put in the transponder, the MCDU is all set up. What we would do is we're going to quickly go to the ATIS so we can get our Q and H.
Heathrow Airport information, Mike 1500 Zulu. Wind 052 at 14. Visibility 6. Sky condition, few clouds at 1,200 feet, few clouds at 4,200 feet, few clouds at 12,200 feet. Temperature 20. Dew light.
Okay, got 3002, so I'm going to move that to that. And you also want to do this bit here as well.
Landing and departing runway 9 left and runway 9 right. VFR aircraft say direction of flight.
As you can see, the IRS is now aligned, and this is now showing here. Okay, so we can go back off that now. So we've got the Q and H, that's all put in. That just basically means the altimeter or the altitude is correct on the aircraft, so that it knows based on pressure what altitude we're on from sea level. Okay, so that's now been sorted there. And what I'm going to do now is quickly go to plan. I'm going to move that to 20 just because I prefer it on 20 personally, but you can just put it on to whichever range you prefer. And when we're in this screen here, which was the flight plan screen, I'll just re-click it, it's still open, but just so you know, what this will do now is we can step through each of the waypoints here, and it will show us on here to make sure that it's all set correctly. Now you'd think pressing down would move it down one on the screen, but that's not how it works on the Airbus. It's a bit like your phone. When you want to scroll down, you swipe up. You do the same on the MCDU. So you press the up arrow and you'll see that jump down, and you also see that now move to the next one, and if we keep doing that you'll see it flicking to the next waypoints along. And as you can see, there's no loops happening or anything weird going on, so we know that's all okay. So I'm gonna say that the plan's all in there properly. Just bear with me because I've left Discord open, and that's why you can hear that beeping in the background, so I'm just going to close that down. There we go, that's now closed down. One thing you will just have noticed, there is a slight glitch since patch 2 that I'm having, where the ECAM or the ECAM keeps putting the display down and turning off. If that happens, just switch this back up, and then that will solve the issue. As you see, it's back up as it was before. It's just basically turning that display off. I don't know why it keeps doing that. It seems to be a bit of a bug since patch 2 that's come out, but it's something you can work around. Obviously it shouldn't happen, and if you're watching this later on, you'll probably find that won't be happening to you, which is fine. That's what should be happening. It should be staying on because I haven't flicked any of the switches. But it's just so you know, it's a little glitch that's happening at the moment since patch 2. Okay, so now we've got all that set in. We've got the transponder in, we've got the Q&H in, the MACDO's been set, and we've now got everything else done. What I'm going to quickly do in the heading, you want this set to 90, because we're taking off from 9 left, which is 09 left, and the runways, like I said but in the previous video, it gives you an idea of its heading. So 09 left is 090 in heading, and if it was 27 right it would be 270 right, give or take. Obviously there will be a variance, but it gives you a general idea of direction. So I'll put that in there. You see it flash on there for a bit and then it's gone back to the lights. I'm going to be the dots, that's just because it's in managed mode. These dots here are telling you in managed. If I pull that out, you can see it goes to standard. If I push it in, it goes into managed mode. Now I've done that, I've just got to reset it. Just to show you. And I also want to put constraints on at this stage as well. So we've got the flight director on, it automatically puts the one on that side as well. So that's that sorted. Okay, and we've confirmed this aligned. So we can now, that's all that bit now done. So I'm now going to tell them to remove the jetway, because we're getting to the stage of where we want to do pushback now. Now obviously when you guys are doing it properly and getting used to it, you'll be able to do this a lot quicker. The only reason I'm doing it slower is because obviously I'm explaining everything to you and showing you. So once you get used to it, you can just see the jetway move out the way there. So all of a sudden now the sun's going through the window. But you'll essentially be able to get through this a lot quicker once you've got the hang of it. Okay. So at this stage I'm going to turn the APU on. So you put the master switch and press start. Now what will happen, this should switch to the APU screen, which it has, and as you can see that's showing nothing in there yet, it's all zeros. That's just come to life. In a minute you should see flap open, which is telling you that it's now opening the exhaust flap up for the intake flap for the APU, and then you'll start seeing it all start slowly starting up. Once these have all got figures in here, then that's the APU generator, which is now started. And then you'll look up here and it will say available, or an abbreviated version of available anyway. So if I just look down here just so you can see it. Now I will say the default, I don't know if the APU screen's working, so you might not see it on default, but the other thing you will find is on the default aircraft it's a lot quicker. It's almost instant from when you click on the start button that it actually starts up, which isn't realistic, but obviously it's a bit quicker. But it's just something for you to take into account. You might not see this screen on default, but if you don't have that screen, the way you can tell, and I'll show you when mine starts up, is it goes green here saying available. Okay, but you can see now it's now spooling up. We've got the temperature rising, so once this is all done that will generate, and then we'll have some information on all here. And this is just makes it a bit more realistic because it would take a bit longer than it does on standard. There we go, so you can see the figures here. So as you can see, it's now giving me all the percentage signs, the volts and the hertz, and that's now moving. If I look up to the top, there you go, it's telling me it's available. Now if you don't have that screen showing on the default, just wait until you see this green marker and you're essentially at the same point. So now I can press the APU bleed. You'll start hearing in the back the little APU now coming on and sending power into the unit. And at this point I'm going to be turning the beacon light on. The reason for that is we're now basically telling everybody that we're now under our own power, and I can turn the external power off. So we're now running on our own power now, and by putting the beacon light on, anybody that looks at the aircraft, or it's basically an indicator to say we're now running on our own power. Okay, so now we've got all that sorted and the beacon light is on, we can attain pushback clearance. Now normally what would happen, if you're on VATSIM or normal ATC, what would happen is you then say I'm requesting pushback. They'd tell you which way to be facing and to give you clearance to pushback. That doesn't do that on Microsoft Flight Sim, but and to give you an idea for people that aren't sure, if you request taxi IFR, I'll go outside. I've left markers on this particular one. I don't normally have them on, but for the sake of tutorials, it gives you a visual cue so you know which way we're going and where it wants you to go, and it helps you with the actual pushback. So he's given us all of the taxiways to use. Now I use Navigraph and I get a map of the actual aircraft, of the actual airport. So because of that, I know all these routes I'll be able to see, and follow them to it. But for the sake of the tutorial, I've just put the chevrons on just to show you which way you're going. And by doing that, I'm going to acknowledge before he tells me off for not acknowledging.
Taxi to and hold short runway 9
And it just gives you an idea which way you want the aircraft to be facing when you come out of the actual when you're coming out of pushback. Now normally you would not be requesting your taxi information until after you've pushed back, but again it's just one thing that Microsoft Flight Sim doesn't simulate brilliantly, but it is, considering its default, it is probably the best default ATC I've seen in any simulator. Obviously if you're using VATSIM, that's a lot more realistic, but I'm just going through the default sides now. I'll probably do another video using the VATSIM network at a later stage. Okay, so we've had the clearance. One thing I am going to quickly do, because it's easy to do at this stage, if I go to the perf page, it gives you some data. I know I'm going to be using flaps 1 and I'm going to be using 0.1 up. This is all information that you would pull in to get your takeoff performance. If I click here, you'll see it's now on here. The 1 up is what you would do for your trim, which I've just set now. And what normally this would be calculated depending on fuel and passenger weight and everything like that. So it's weight, balance, fuel and all that lot would then determine what you would be putting your trim to, and generally in the Airbus, flaps 1 is your takeoff and then flaps 3 is your landing, unless obviously you need to be slower for shorter runways and you can go to full. So you can kind of vary, that will vary depending on where you're going to. As you can see here, it gives me the information here on where we're on our V1, VR and V2 speeds. The V2 speed is what you want to pull up here, which is 128. Now, I don't believe the performance on this is working correctly yet, because I'm not seeing it ever change from 1 to 8. That again would normally change depending on the amount of fuel, the amount of weight. So it would vary, but I don't think that has been set up yet. But I believe in the next update for the NX project, that should be coming in, because I know that I believe they're bringing in the tablet, which would go on there, so you can start putting in all your information, and then that would also, if it's anything like the tow list from X-Plane, it will help you calculate what this section should be here as well. Okay, but now we've done that, we've got that pull in, it just makes it easier for the takeoff side, as opposed to taking your eyes off the taxiing. So that's how that's done. I'm going to leave that screen up because we're going to want it for takeoff. I'm going to request pushback now. So if we go to ground services and request pushback.
CT2020 requesting pushback.
CT2020 pushback request accepted.
You'll see now the tug's starting to push in. Once it starts moving, the aircraft, I'll turn the parking brake off. Normally what would happen, it would lift up and then they would tell you please release parking brake, but obviously didn't do it on this one, but that's fine. So once we see it moving, I'll release the parking brake. What I am going to do is just move that across to, if you have a look, I've moved it across to ignition start, so it's ready for the engines to start. So I'm just looking down here, there you go, you can see we're moving. So I am going to release the parking brake and I'm going to flick engine 2, you can see the parking brake is off, and I'm flicking engine 2 to on. And you should start seeing, there you go, it's now starting, the N2's going up. If you have a look down, you can see that engine's now spinning, this one's not. While that does that, I'm going to wait until the aircraft gets to this white line here, like the rear wheels, I want just to pass it. When that happens, I'm going to tell it I want to steer to the right, because I want it to face that way. Now, although it's pushing us in this direction, so you'd think right would steer us that way, it doesn't, it's opposite, it's your aircraft's right and left. So now we've done that, I'm going to say, I've just told it the wrong way because I've accidentally pressed the wrong one. So this is not going to work well. I'm just going to quickly hit the parking brake just to stop him from doing it. And I'm going to quickly tell him to steer to the right. And that's what I mean, you have to pay attention. I've just taken my eye off the ball a little bit. I've put the parking brake on because it's almost pushed you to a stop, but as you can see he is still kind of moving me, but it means now he's getting it steered in the right position. It's a little trick if you ever need to quickly do it so it doesn't push you so far back that you're up here in the grass. Put your parking brake on, you can see he's starting to turn me a little bit on the spot, Engine 2 has stabilised, so I'm going to put engine 1 on. And I'm going to go back out. Now, you shouldn't really be doing it this way. I'm going to turn the parking brake off again so we can now turn me around. You shouldn't really have done that, but that's only a little, kind of a bit of a cheap way of doing it if you accidentally press the wrong way with this tug. So even though I just told you to do it, because I just hadn't pulled the masts down far enough and it's accidentally pushed me the wrong way. I'm now going to tell it to stop because you've got a... It has a delay from you telling it to it stopping, so he should stop now. I'm going to put the parking brake back on, and as you can see, we're pretty much, considering I made a mistake on turning the way it's turning, we're pretty level, so that's not too bad. But you always have to think ahead. When you want it to stop, you have to press it to stop slightly quicker. Oh, somebody's jumped into my space now. But slightly quicker than when you want it to stop, because it won't stop until you physically have finished sending the message. So we're just now waiting for the engine to finish spooling up. Once it's done that, it will stabilise, which I believe it has done now. We've just stabilised now. I'm going to move this back to normal mode because it's a lovely day. If it's like cold, icy weather, possibly stormy weather, sometimes they will tell you to leave it in ignition start. I don't need to in this because you couldn't get a nicer day at the moment. So I'm putting it to normal. Okay, so we've been pushed back at this stage. And we've now had our taxi clearance, which we would normally have now requested. So if you're on VATSIM, now's the time to request your taxi clearance, and it will now give you all the jetways and all the taxiways it wants you to take. Okay. So now that we've done that, if it is cold and you need the anti-ice on, at this stage you'll now be flicking on the anti-ice. You can see my generators have now stopped saying fault because we've now got the engines on, so they're now generating power. So at this stage I can now turn the APU bleed off and I can turn the master switch off. What this will do is it will now turn off the APU because it's no longer needed because the engines are now generating all the power internally. So we've done all that. One thing I'm going to quickly do as well is lift up the spoiler or the speed brake. That basically arms your spoilers. So if you have an aborted takeoff, it will automatically set your spoilers off to slow you down and stop you. Just make sure I'm not holding anybody up while I'm quickly going through this with you. You can now also set your flaps. So what I've done is click that to flaps 1. You could do this while you're taxiing, but I'm just quickly showing it you so you can see. So flaps 1 position there. And what you would also do is make sure your rudder's set to 0 as well, which is this bit here. Okay. So now that we've got all that, we've had taxi clearance, we've got all that bit set, the hand signal's been received. What you would do is turn your wing light off at this stage, and you're going to put your taxi lights and runway turn off lights on because we're now getting ready to taxi. You would, as you can see now, you've got your lights on here, so it's just telling you that you're taxiing, and it's lighting it up. Now, at this point, you would normally put on your auto brake onto max because that, again, so when you fail takeoff or abort takeoff, it means it will maximize the braking for you, along with the spoilers. But there is an issue with the default and also the NX mod at the moment. That if I press the brake in, you'll see the pedals push in, and then it turns off the auto brake. That shouldn't happen, but it seems to be a glitch that's happening at the moment, so that will be fixed on a future update. But you would normally turn that on now as well. But if at the moment, if you're still having that issue, depending on when you watch this video, the workaround is just turn it on when you line up on the runway. So I'm now getting on my way for taxiing, and I've released the parking brake, as you can see. We've got that all set in, everything's set, and we're going to slowly move our way. Now we're slowly going to move our way to okay, apologies for that, guys. The sim had just crashed, so I've just reloaded it, got us back to the same point again, so I'm just restarting the taxiing now. What we'll do, because of that, I am going to be checking to make sure that I have just started it all up correctly, but we're now back on the taxiing to 09 left. So I've got my parking brake set to is off. I've got my speed brake on to armed.
1337.
I've got my Q&H set, flight directors on, speed set. My beacon light, my logo light is, my taxi light, and my runway turn-off lights are on. All this has been set here. The max obviously isn't on for the obvious reason it keeps turning off whenever you brake. And I've also put the same information back in here again. So the only thing that's changed really is my squawk code, because it's changed it to a different area, but the rest of it now should be as it was when we first started taxiing. So apologies for that, but we're back where we should be. So yeah, so essentially now while you're doing the taxiing, you could go around and start just making sure you've done all the procedures here, and just make sure you got everything done. So at this point, obviously you've already obtained the route you're going by at this stage. And what you can do is, if you press takeoff config here, it's this out of all these buttons here, it's the one right on the top on its own. If you press that, it will flick this screen on here, and it will tell you what you've still got left to do. Now, if you've forgotten to do something like flaps or something like that, it's going to start beeping a master warning at you, and a big red logo here which says flaps not configured. In which case, it's reminding you that's what you've got to do. Okay. At the moment, we've got pretty much everything configured, bar the brakes, auto brakes being at maximum, and checking with the cabin crew that they're prepared for takeoff. But I'll do that as I get to my holding point on the actual runway, because that's a better time for them to get that sorted. Okay, so we're now getting up to the end of the taxi, to the runway, and where we're going to be holding short. You can see somebody's just about to crash here. Rest in peace. He might suddenly shoot through. Oh, no, he looks like he saved it just, or he bounced off the ground, one or the other. Now we've got somebody ahead of us. He's going round, I hope. So we've got somebody ahead of us, just lying on the runway. Oh no, he is going to try and land on top of that plane. So what we're going to do at this point, we're now going to click the call button. And I'm not going to put max yet, because obviously I've still got a brake. So what I'm going to do is request go to tower, and I'm going to request my takeoff clearance.
Heathrow Tower CT2020 ready to go runway 90 left IFR to Okishi.
CT2020 cleared for takeoff runway 90 left.
So we've been told now we're cleared to take off. So I'm now going to line up on the runway, ready to take off. At this stage, what I'm going to be doing is turning on my landing lights, put my other light for takeoff, get the strobe light on as well, because we're going to need that, and I'm going to turn in my runway turn-off lights. And always acknowledge the takeoff clearance with help. So I am lining up now on the runway itself. Pull that down to a halt. There we go. So we're now lined up on the runway. Now, because of the fault currently with the maximum brake, this is now when I'm pressing the maximum brake, and you can now see that's all on, and it's now saying we're ready for takeoff. I'm just going to press that button again just to make sure it's happy. We're ready. We've got the spoilers on. We've got the brakes set. Flaps are in the right position. Speeds on here. So we've got everything essentially set to how we want it. We've just turned on the landing lights, turned off the runway turning lights, put that on. We've got the strobe light on, the beacon lights on. So now we can pretty much say we are ready for takeoff. So we've got to that stage now. And what we're going to do is power ourselves up. And we're now rolling for takeoff.
Speedbird 9er, flight 4 taxi, into position and hold.
You also want to quickly, I've not done it yet, but you want to put that on so it's on.
Position and hold, Speedbird 9er, 54.
So that switch there is basically for your TCAS, so it's set. So we're now taking off. We've got a positive rate, landing gears going up. And we're getting close to our point now, so I'm going to turn flaps off now as well. we can turn this section off here because we don't need that now we've taken off, but we leave the landing lights on.
Contact London Center on 118.475.
118.475.
The auto throttle's now on, and we're going to put our autopilot on as well, so it's going to control.
London Center CT2020 is climbing through.
Now if you roll your speed back, you'll get thrust climb or THR climb on here,
020 London Center, continue to Charlie Lima November as
and you'll see it's on CL there as well. That's now basically, you're now on managed speed, so it's now running on the speed which is on your managed speed MCDU setup, and you'll see that screen is now automatically changed to the climb stage. So this is it essentially now all set up, and we have now taken off. Just wait for that to finish. Your landing lights wouldn't go off now until you hit 10,000 feet. Once you've hit 10,000, you would turn that off. Okay. So there you go. That's the Airbus A320, which has now all been started from cold and dark, and has now been taken off. So I'm just going to quickly change the channel so I don't get interrupted. So there you go. Yeah. So we've now taken off. We're now in the air, ready for our climb to cruise altitude. I've been CT Tech Gaming. This has been Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. This has been my tutorial for the A320 Cold and Dark startup. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit that like and subscribe to the channel. If you get the bell on, it will let you know of any future tutorials, any future videos I have up on the channel. If there is anything you want to see, or if there's anything I've missed or anything like that, because like I've said in the previous video, I'm not a certified pilot, so this is just going from the Airbus checklist and against what you can physically do with the current aircraft. But if there's anything I've missed or anything you want to know, please just drop a comment on the video and I'll be happy to have a look at it for you and see what we can do. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.